Let's talk about the derivatives of inverse trig functions. Now, the inverse trig functions come in related pairs, just like the trig functions come in related pairs. And we'll see that their derivatives look pretty similar. So for the first one, we got the derivative of arc sine, and the derivative of arc sine looks like this. It's going to be 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. And we will be deriving this derivative at the end of this video. If you look at the derivative of arc cosine, it's very similar. So it's just going to be 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. And the way that differs from arc sine is there's just a negative. Okay. If we look at the derivative of arc tangent, the derivative of arc tangent looks like this. It's 1 over 1 plus x squared. And let's jump to the bottom part of this page. The derivative of arc cotangent is going to be negative 1 over 1 plus x squared. So you can see how the derivatives of arc tangent and arc cotangent look very similar. They just differ by a negative, just like the derivative of arc sine and arc cosine differ by a negative. If we look at the derivative of arc secant, the derivative of arc secant looks like this. It's 1 over x times the square root of x squared minus 1. And you'll never guess what the derivative of arc cosecant looks like. It's negative 1 over x times the square root of x squared minus 1. Okay, so I hope you can see the relationship between all of these. The ones that we care about are the first three on this page. So the ones that we really are concerned with is the derivative of arc sine, the derivative of arc cosine, and the derivative of arc tangent. These are like the big three. I would expect you to have these memorized because we use these a lot. I promised you that we would derive the formula for the derivative of arc sine. So let's do that now. We're going to start off with our y equal to arc sine of x. And what we're going to do is we're going to take sine of both sides. So when we take sine of both sides, we get sine of y is equal to sine of arc sine of x. That's taking sine of both sides. Okay. Next, I want you to notice that sine and arc sine are inverse trig functions of each other. So the right-hand side is going to simplify to just x. So this means that we got sine of y is equal to just x. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to use implicit differentiation. So we implicitly differentiate both sides with respect to x. Okay, so you're treating y implicitly as a function of x, which, we've seen from this equation up here. And when we do that, when we take the derivative of the left-hand side, we need to use the chain rule. So the derivative of the outside function sine is just cosine. You keep the inside thing, which is the y, and you got to multiply by the derivative of the inside. So the derivative of y is just dy dx. When you differentiate the right-hand side, the derivative of x is just 1. Okay. So when we simplify this down, we're going to get dy dx is equal to 1 over cosine of y, like this. Now, we want to use our Pythagorean identity. So we know that cosine squared y plus sine squared y is going to equal to 1. So this means that cosine of y is really going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus sine squared y. But remember, we restricted the domain of arc sine. So the domain of arc sine, this was restricted to be from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. All right, so for the x values from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, cosine is always going to be positive. So really, I could get rid of that plus or minus, and really we just get the positive square root. So using that fact, my derivative becomes 1 over the square root of 1 minus sine squared y. My sine of y was equal to x, so that means I could replace the 1 minus sine squared y in the denominator with 1 minus x squared. And that proves that the derivative of arc sine of x, which is dy dx, that is just 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. All right? So in this video, we just tell you what the derivatives of the inverse trig functions are. The big three you need to memorize are arc sine, arc cosine, and arc tangent. And we provided a proof for the derivative of arc sine. All right, everybody, take care.